Welcome to our webinar on Understanding the Ref, a quick primer for PGRs. Thank you very much for those of you who joined us online, which we currently, I believe, have 200 people online. I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But also, so my name is Lawrence McNamara, and my colleague Sarah Fox, I think you can see in the little corner of the screen. We have other colleague, Michael, who is sitting in the background and making sure that everything goes like it should. So look, welcome to what we're going to do today. And a couple of things just in advance. You all have the slides, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching later. And the reason we've done that is because to some extent the slides are resources for you, but it also means you don't then have to take notes. You can look at things at your leisure, and there's a few things, as we'll discuss, you might find you want to come back to. We have, right, that's better. We have started off just with one slide that tells you a little bit about Sarah and myself. There's only 2 points here I think I want to draw out. One is it's a bit of our background and our experience, including just a little bit of information about our doctorates, given this particular audience. And the second is that we come from different disciplines. And though I've done a bit in history and Sarah has done a bit in law, we come from different disciplines, but as you'll see, the things we're going to say apply across disciplines, especially across arts, humanities and social sciences. I think there's often very little difference in what we'll talk about in that regard. So to that end, let's get underway. So first up, we're really glad that what we've put on has attracted the interest it has. And we do feel it has possibly met something of an unmet need. So if you are finding yourself thinking you want to know more about the ref, you're certainly not alone. So we've had around 470 people register for this, of whom about 350 are PhD students, 60 are early career researchers, and then a selection of non-academic staff, of various others from universities, some from outside universities. And I think one thing is, that's quite an audience that it is a privilege to speak to. That is an immense powerhouse of talent. And I did the rough maths on how many words between you would have all written by the end of this. I can't remember what it was, but it ran certainly into the millions. So I hope your doctoral studies are going well for those of you doing it. For the early career researchers, I hope you are sitting back still enjoying the achievement of that doctorate you've done. What our aim today is to do is to talk about the ref and what it is, how it works, but with a particular edge to, from your point of view, what might it be helpful for you to know? So to really try and do something that assists you. And given the balance of our audience, we really are going to direct this in a way that is framed for PhD students. But I think, and I hope it will be relevant more widely to that broader group that's online and interested. And our aim is to explain the general position and the major points. There is, for everything we do here, there is nuance. The ref has hundreds of pages of rules. And so everything we say could be prefaced with, it's more complex than this, but. However, what we do want to get across is the major points and the things that you might want. And we've given you in the slides resources which we hope will then help you find the specifics of what you might want to find. For Q&A, we will do some Q&A at the end. So we think we'll go for about 25 minutes. There's a Q&A box on Zoom if you want to ask a question. These won't be visible to anyone except Sarah and myself. We'll try to answer those at the end, and you can ask questions again at the end. One thing we would ask of you is maybe just wait until we've covered the different sections before asking a question, because we've tried to anticipate some of the things that people might ask. So let's have a look then at the first thing. What might it be helpful for you to know? I think some of this depends on your role or your job. So whether that role is a doctoral student, an academic researcher, whether it is in some ways professional staff, support staff. And often the question of what you know is driven a lot around the ref by what you need to do. And these are quite different things. So you're often told very clearly about what you or others need to do. So for PGRs, typically you need to write a thesis. For early career researchers, you need to publish an article. And you're also given usually the information you need to know in order to do that. So for example, your progress requirements for PhD students or journal requirements for articles. But sometimes it might be useful to have a bit more knowledge in your intellectual and practical toolbox that you use for your PhD or your job. And that takes us to what you might want to know and what it might be helpful to know. And sometimes you want to know things because it can just be interesting and help to have a grasp. Nice to know you feel you have a grasp of what others are talking about. And you have a sneaking suspicion that that may help. But in between what you want to know and what you need to know is this question of what it would help you to know. And that will vary at different times, but that's our aim today, is that midpoint on the spectrum, things we think it might help you to know. And whether you're a PGR, an early career researcher, or in any other role, knowing more about the ref can help you to do what you need to do, but it might also expand the possibilities and the horizons of what you might do. So for PGRs, what do you need to do? Well, you need to write a thesis. And knowing about the ref and the criteria can help because they articulate what scholarship and contributions to knowledge are. And that's the mission of your PhD. For PGRs, what do you need to do? Well, maybe you're being told you should publish an article. And knowing the ref criteria can help because journals are looking for the same things. For PGRs, what else do you need to do? Well, maybe you need to, but hopefully there'll be something like a job after you finish. You have a career plan. For those of you headed or wanting to head down academic career paths, knowing about the ref can help because it gives you an understanding of what a university is doing and what its staff are contributing to what might be required of them. And for non-academic careers, knowing about the ref can help because it gives you an understanding of how relationships between universities and academics and non-academic bodies can be hugely valuable and can assist those non-academic bodies and can often assist the public good because it links, often those non-academic bodies build a bridge out of the academy, out of that production of knowledge into the community. And that in itself is a really valuable reason to know about the ref for some of this. As for what people know about the ref in this group, our little survey that we asked you to fill in that said, well, how much do you think you know about the ref? We had about 250 responses. About 110 said they know very little. About 110 said they know the basics. And about 30 said they had a reasonable knowledge. In general terms, the further into things you are, the better knowledge people had, but there was quite a spread. So our aim in this is really that you should hopefully finish in another 48 minutes by the time we've done this and Q&A and say to yourself, I actually know a reasonable amount about this now. I think I even know more than a reasonable amount, and I have enough resources here to equip me with not just what I need to do, with a whole lot of things that will help me. So that's where we want you to be at the end of this. So very briefly, let's have a look then at what the ref is. It began as the RAE, the Research Assessment Exercise. It became the REF, the Research Excellence Framework, in 2014. The big change was that it introduced an impact assessment. REF 2021 covers the period 2014 to 2020. It retained and increased the significance of impact, and there was a bit of a change in the approach to outputs, publications. REF 2028, we presume there will be one or something like it, but it'll be some time before we know what that looks like. So what we're talking to is REF 2021 here. That said, whatever the future holds, it seems we can presume safely that academics will need to produce strong publications and to deploy and develop impact skills to at least some extent, and that universities will be assessed on the way those things are done. The REF, what is its purpose or function? So it calculates the way that funding is distributed to higher education institutions. And the funding that it is concerned with is what's called QR funding, research quality funding, quality of research funding. So it's a big pot of money, and they assess the research performance of universities and say, well, based on that performance, this is how much different universities will get out of this pot of research funding. The better performers get more of that money. That's the simple thing. One of the effects is that league tables emerge. So the REF does not create league tables. The REF provides data, but others will build league tables out of that. And you see those published in Times Higher and Research Fortnight and various publications. Who runs it? Research England run it for the 4 UK funding bodies. Research England, Higher Education Funding Council for Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. 2 bits of confusion, clarification. The research councils are different. They provide separate research funding, and they are a part of what's called UKRI. The second thing is Research England is also a part of UKRI. The other 3 funding bodies for QR funding are not. When we talk about funding, how much funding are we talking about? Well, about $2 billion a year in the last REF cycle. Of that, 1.63 billion pounds, did I say dollars? Sorry, that's my Australianness. 2 billion pounds a year for each year in the last REF cycle. In England in 2019-20, it was 1.63 billion of that. So that's about 82% of the total pot of money goes to England. If you look, for instance, at law, about 21 million pounds of QR funding went to English law schools. So that's about 1.2% of the total pot for English universities goes to law. That's just a rough guide. It's incredibly costly to run the REF. If you are also just wanting to think about the effects of COVID-19, where REF distributes about £2 billion of funding a year, COVID-19 is predicted to result in a shortfall of $2.6 billion to the sector in the current year. Let's look then at REF, what it is, scoring and funding. So the scoring, REF scores are done in this idea of 4-star, 3-star, 2-star and 1-star. The funding model, only research ranked at 4-star or 3-star is counted towards funding. And of that, 4-star research is worth 4 times as much as 3-star research. And so in that pot of £2 billion that's allocated each year, this is the significance of the research quality. And a 2-star or 1-star publication or case study attracts no funding at all. And so this has the effect that universities want staff to produce outputs and impact of at least 3-star standard and better still 4-star standard. Before we get into how the REF works, the criteria, it'll just help to step back a little bit. So when a university sort of engages with the REF, it makes a submission, or sometimes called a return. And a REF submission is based around a discipline, and these are divided into 34 units of assessment. Unit of assessment number 18 is law, UOA 19 is politics and international studies. And in a REF submission, you have outputs, which are publications, impact, which will be a number of case studies, for most departments somewhere between about 3 and 7, depending on how many people they've got, and a research environment statement of about 8,000 words. There is also a provision for interdisciplinary research, but we can leave that for the moment. So when they make this submission and they say to the REF panels, here's what we've published, here's our impact, here's our environment. What does a result look like? So the next couple of slides show you some results from 2014. And the essence of it is that you get overall results for units of assessment. And then you can see expanded profiles, which break down the outputs, impact, and environment. And you can read the full submission. So if we look at just the first of these slides, you'll see that the spread is across 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, or 1-star with unclassified. And what you get there is this spread of research quality. And significantly here, the data is not institution-based, it's unit of assessment-based. You also get these rankings, though, that come out in the league tables that rank institutions based on what they call research power. I won't bother with the methodology that's used for that. But what you then get is you get the expanded profiles. You can see the scores for each: outputs, impact, and environment. And then you'll see at the bottom in that slide, you can actually just click on those links and view the submissions. You can see what their case studies were. So let's look then at outputs. When we talk about research outputs, what are we talking about? So a unit of assessment might be a department in some form or other, it might be a combination of departments. They need to submit, on average, sorry, somebody has just typed up a question that just says sound question mark. I'm not sure if there is a sound problem, Michael, let us know. But other than that, everything I can see seems to be working. Sorry, I will just double check that, yes. The UOA must submit an average of 2.5 peer-reviewed publications published across the last 7 years for every staff member, full-time equivalent staff member on a research post. A minimum of 1 per person and a maximum of 5. So you can't get somebody who's published 10 sensational publications and just use all those. Publications by PhD students are not eligible, nor are they required for submission to the ref. If they're co-authored, it might be different. If you're a staff member and a PhD student, it could be different. But that's one of the reasons why PhD students aren't often told a lot about the ref, because it's not what you need to do for most of you. What's an output? Typically, it's a peer-reviewed article, but it could be a chapter in an edited collection, it could be a book, co-authored pieces can count, and for some of the creative sectors, it can be various issues of exhibitions and performance and so forth. What are the criteria against which these are assessed? So the outputs criteria for every unit of assessment is 4-star, world leading, 3-star, internationally excellent, 2-star, recognised internationally, 1-star, recognised nationally, unclassified, falls below the standard or doesn't meet the definition requirements. This doesn't tell you much in a way. And because there's a lot of difference in disciplines and how they work, that then moves to some more detailed criteria. So you can look at this at your leisure, but basically there are 4 main panels, break down roughly into health, STEM, social sciences, arts and humanities. And each of those has a set of criteria that apply, for instance, to all social science units of assessment. So these next 2 slides I want to talk to a little bit. These are the outputs criteria for social sciences. And if looking a couple of slides ahead, you'll see we've given you the list of how you can find the criteria for your discipline. But let's just go back to these. So what you see here is that 4-star work, world-leading work, they say, well, it will exhibit some of the following characteristics. It will be outstandingly novel in its development of concepts, as opposed to 3-star, which is just novel. It will be at 4-star a primary or essential point of reference. At 3-star, an important point of reference. At 4-star, it will have a formative influence on the intellectual agenda. At 3-star, it will contribute very important knowledge, which has a lasting influence. At 2-star, it will provide important knowledge. And at 1-star, it will provide useful knowledge. And so these two slides, they give you a sense of the discrimination they're putting between these different levels. And I think there's something I would draw your attention to on this one, which is 2-star research is internationally recognised. It provides important knowledge in the application. It contributes to incremental and cumulative advantages in knowledge. It's thorough and professional application of research design and techniques of investigation and analysis. And yet it gets no funding at all in the REF model. The standards are really, really high, and that's the nature of universities. A quick thing here, your PhD criteria as opposed to outputs criteria. So typically a PhD is expressed as an original contribution to knowledge. And I've taken here the national framework that says, well, here's what a doctoral degree requires a student to have demonstrated. I'm not going to equate this on the 1-star to 4-star points on the REF spectrum. That's not fruitful because your institution sets out the criteria you need for your discipline to satisfy completion for a PhD. That said, don't be unnerved. Your PhD is not marked on REF criteria. You're not expected to produce world-leading research. But when it comes to publishing your PhD research, then the REF criteria can be helpful. PhD research can easily be 3-star or even 4-star because you've got time and depth. It is rigorous research often, and there are immensely talented people on PhD programs. And so the REF criteria fit into that publication side of it, but not necessarily into your doctoral submission. You've got the resource there. You can look at it and click through if you wish, if you want to find the criteria, the outputs criteria for your discipline. Somebody has just said here, I think 5-star has been introduced for REF 2020, not that I'm aware of. Okay, impact is next, and I will pass over to Sarah now. So Sarah, I think, just needs to...
Here I am. Could you scroll on another 2 slides, please, Lawrence? That's it, and again, thank you. So it's a real honour to speak to you all today. I think this is the largest audience I've ever spoken to. I don't think I've ever managed to convince 230 people to be interested in the history of birth and midwifery in the 18th century. So thank you for tuning in to listen to us. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about impact and a little bit about environment before handing back to Lawrence. So what is impact? Well, for the purposes of the REF, impact is defined as an effect on or change or benefit to the activity, attitude, awareness, behaviour, capacity, opportunity, performance, policy, practice, process or understanding of an audience, beneficiary, community, constituency, organisation or individuals in any geographic location, whether locally, regionally, nationally or internationally. Essentially what you're looking to do is articulate how the world beyond the university is different as a result of your research. And this sounds very straightforward, but it often isn't, as I will discuss in a moment. Next slide, please, Lawrence. So the number of case studies each department needs to submit depends upon the number of research staff, as defined by the REF, that are working there. The full-time equivalent number is calculated collectively, so a full-time staff member plus one who works 3 days a week, for example, equals 1.6 FTE. And a department may have 50 academic staff, but not all of them will be full-time and not all will have a REF-defined independent research component in their jobs. So some might be research assistants, some might be teaching focused. And so out of those 50, you might find that your department has 35 FTE staff for REF purposes. And what does an impact case study cover? Well, it's actually quite a short document, particularly when you consider the amount of time it takes to put one together. It contains a 100-word summary of the key points. Then there's around 500 words on underpinning research, and you can list up to 6 research outputs in the case studies for 2021. You then have somewhere in the region of 750 words to provide details of the impact. And this is a bit flexible, but not that much. And you should also provide up to 10 sources to corroborate that impact. As with any piece of writing, it's really important to have a strong narrative that links your research to the impact, making it really easy for the panel who will be reading lots of case studies. If you're keen to look at some examples, you'll find lots of them on the REF 2014 database, and you'll see the link on the slide. The slides will be available on the event page after we have finished presenting, and hopefully you will have been sent a link to them as well already. There have been some changes for REF 2021, and there will presumably be more for REF 2028, but it does give you an idea of what impact case studies should look like. Next slide, please. Thank you. So why do we bother? Well, each impact case study is really worth a lot to your department. As you can see from this slide, it varies based upon the size of your department, but the figures remain pretty significant. Research by Reed and Kerridge has suggested that a 4-star impact case study nets around £324,000 for the department. By contrast, Lawrence has calculated that a 4-star output is worth around £63,000. I think it's really important to note this huge difference in value between a 4-star and a 3-star case study. Good impact case studies are really valuable things to university departments in very real terms. A strong track record in impact can therefore be valuable to you should you decide to pursue an academic career. Next slide, please. So what constitutes 4-star impact? Well, impact is assessed using 2 criteria, reach and significance. Sometimes you might hear attribution added in too, and that simply means a clear narrative linking the researcher to the impact. Reach and significance are not separate entities and will therefore be assessed together by the REF panel. Reach is often conceived on geographical terms, so it's rather assumed that global impact, for example, has reach, and indeed it definitely does. But reach can also refer to your potential audience. If there's a particular community of people that you engage with in your research, and your research leads to improved outcomes or expectations for that entire group, your impact has reach, even if the numbers are relatively small. Significance is about the scale of impact that your research has. So let's say that as part of your historical research, you organise an exhibition at a London institution. This is, for example, the first exhibition of portraits of pregnant women from the 12th century through to the present day. The significance of your exhibition is limited, even if it's comparatively well attended. But let's say you then design a permanent online version of the exhibition that receives 12,000 hits in the first 6 months and is listed by the Telegraph as one of the 5 most influential cultural websites that year. The exhibition inspires 2 anthologies of poetry and a large mother and baby fair that attracts 15,000 visitors in one weekend. It goes on tour in the US, receiving 47,000 visitors in a year. Feedback suggests that it has provoked visitors to think about unusual histories and invisible histories of the poor, of pregnancy, of mothering. Then you can make a case that you have had significant impact. Next slide, please. One of the really fundamental challenges of articulating impact is identifying it in the first place. To do this, you need to apply the so what strategy. And this can seem ridiculous, but it really helps to articulate the difference between engagement and pathways to impact and the impact itself. So let's say, for example, that you are working on getting COVID-19 recognised as a disease of neglect. You persuade 3 big newspapers to run 2-page spreads on the links between COVID-19 and poverty. The story circulates in some form for several days. Is this impact? Well, no, I'm afraid it isn't. Whilst you no doubt raise some public awareness of the disease and its causes, there's no change in the way that COVID-19 is treated or classified. This is engagement, but not impact. So now you make a submission to the UN Special Rapporteur for Poverty and Human Rights, and they made it the focus of their recent mission to an affected area. Is this impact? Well, still no. Despite the huge task of bringing your argument to the attention of the UNSR, you have to ask, what difference has their involvement made? Has anything changed? Essentially, so what? The short answer is no, very little has changed, but you have created a pathway to impact. The involvement of the UNSR in your work will no doubt raise the profile of COVID-19 as a disease of neglect. So then the involvement of the UNSR persuades NGOs and human rights organisations to lobby the World Health Organization, which may in turn lead to a change in the classification of COVID-19 and therefore increased funding for treatment, government support for prevention procedures and adjustments to medical protocols and training. And these are all solid examples of impact. It's really important to keep an eye on impact when you're planning new research projects and as you progress through your doctoral research. Impact is becoming more and more central to the way academics work. For example, the UKRI has recently made the decision to remove separate statements of impact from their funding applications because they argue that impact is becoming a key element in the overall case for support. Ultimately, you will be wise to talk through early research plans with your school's dedicated impact lead, and they will be able to help you think about engagement, knowledge exchange, and the co-production of research. Think also about how you might evidence the impact of your research. If you receive an email telling you how helpful your research is, keep a copy of it. Maybe follow it up by asking how your research has been helpful. Where you become aware that someone's recommending your research to others or has implemented some of the suggestions that you might have made, get in touch with them and ask for a short statement about the impact of your work. If you feel self-conscious about asking for feedback, blame it on university bureaucracy, people like me. I am required by the university to show that my research has made a difference, for example, might be how you start your email. And again, you may find that your dedicated impact lead can help you with this. Luck is, of course, a factor here. Lawrence's research has shown that expertise in an area attracts impact opportunities. The luck lies in being an expert in an area that is in demand, yet it is also possible to create your own luck. Engaging with the public or industry at the very beginning of a research project will help you to identify areas in which your research can have impact. The co-production of research with these groups may allow you to apply your research and outputs to the needs of a particular group. If you want to read more about impact, we are considering running some more webinars on that topic particularly, but also the University of Sheffield has produced a useful guide. Next slide, please. And again. So the final component of the REF submission is the environment statement. And this is worth 15% of the total result and looks to assess the vitality and sustainability of the department. It is unlikely that you're going to be involved in the production of an environment statement until much later in your academic career, at which point you'll have a much more nuanced and detailed understanding of the REF than we are able to give you here. Next slide, please. If you're interested, we've included the assessment criteria for the research environment in the slides. Remember the funding model. A 4-star classification is extremely valuable to your department. And don't forget, you can download these slides from the event page. And I think we shall include the URL on the final slide as well. Next slide, please, and over to you, Lawrence.
Okay, I believe I'm unmuted and I appear to be back. Okay, thanks indeed, Sarah. The impact is one of the most challenging areas that people find, and I'll talk about that just a little bit more in a moment. But hopefully you'll get a sense of what impact is. I feel of all the 3 areas we're talking about, outputs you're on most familiar ground. Environment you largely don't need to be concerned with at this stage. But impact is really challenging and I think, again, something that is a big learning process. Let's have a look then, just as a PGR or as an early career researcher, how might understanding the REF help me? First, the REF does not drive everything and everybody, and nor should it. Second, you should not need to worry about REF 2021 unless you have been told differently. Listen to those you work with. This is not a blanket statement. But for most of you as PGRs, you won't have to worry about REF 2021. Not every PGR wants to go into an academic career. And for various people, you will have cultures in departments where sometimes there is this sort of presumption almost that if you're doing a PhD, you want an academic career. But that's not true. it doesn't mean the ref isn't helpful to you, and I'll explain that. When will we know what the ref requirements for 2028 will look like? Well, I'd have a guess that it will be 2025. The results will be, they're 18 months away, for 2 years away really for this ref. Then there will be a review of that. Then there will be some consultation. So I would say there will start to be an indication in 2025, and it'll probably be 2026 before things are pretty fixed as to what will happen. So it's a while. One thing that's significant, the ref cycle, so when publications are eligible, mean that any publications from January 1st, 2021 onwards will count to the next ref. And publications where things are published prior to January 2021, or from just up to 31 December 2020, count for the current ref. If you've got any work that you are publishing that's coming out, you might just want to talk to whoever your department lead is and ask them if you're uncertain about just exactly where that fits in the ref cycle, and if you have any choice about whether you think it could be better to publish in one cycle rather than another. That can be worth discussing, certainly, with colleagues, depending on what your particular needs are at any given time. With regard to outputs, I think one of the things the ref criteria do is they recognise and they articulate how you make significant original contributions to knowledge and use rigorous methodology. And that's kind of at the heart of what you're doing as a doctoral student or as an early career researcher. You know, these criteria, that's what top tier journals are looking for. And to be able to articulate and frame this in the context of the literature, that's what you're kind of looking for when you look at a journal article. And if you read some of the top tier journals in whatever your field is, look at how, you just need to read the introductions often, and you'll see how they tend to do exactly this kind of stuff in an article. So that's driven by the idea of making contributions to knowledge. That is, PGR, REF, research councils, they all align in that way because that's the enterprise. Also, understanding outputs can understand what's demanded of staff and how that fits into recruitment strategies and publication strategies for departments. Understanding impact, I think to be able to distinguish between, as Sarah pointed out, impact and engagement is really important. To understand what evidence you need to prove there's been impact. If you think something made a difference, well, how you gather evidence. Also, what might be realistic aims. For a lot of us, and certainly for me was the case and still is, there are incredible learning curves at work here. You learn things on a very steep angle, often just by the result of circumstance. It's also worth noting, especially for those of you that aren't necessarily looking at academic careers, impact requirements drive NGOs, they drive other organisations, they drive government departments. That is, organisations need and want to have impact. They want to make a difference. And that same idea of what impact is, how you prove it, permeates both academia and non-academic organisations. And to understand how academics and non-academic organisations can work effectively together. What is the non-academic organisations and NGOs especially, but corporates, they bring a different set of skills and networks, and that combination of relationships can be really significant to recognise there. Understanding environment. Understanding what it is in ref terms and how it might drive what departments do helps you. And as a PGR, you can sometimes use that to leverage support from the department. If you want to host, an event or something, an appreciation of where that fits into the department's research strategy, impact strategy, and the research environment can be quite helpful because the people you're often dealing with will be very aware of that. The Q&A function, we've got a bunch of questions, some of which I've noted, some of which Sarah will have noted, and we will go to those. Just before we do that, we will send you a feedback form about this, and it's going to ask you your views about the webinar, what you found helpful. and whether you might be interested in anything else from us, specifically on impact. We'll also email you in about 6 months another feedback form, because we're interested in seeing if what we covered has had any help beyond just the point of the webinar, the moment of it, and the immediate kind of things that follow. There's links to downloads there. Everybody got emailed the slides beforehand, or they're available on the event page, and we will email out the the video for this as soon as we've got it ready, and we will post a link to that, I expect, on the event page for the webinar also, but probably somewhere else. So let's then just turn our minds to Q&A. Sarah, I have looked through some of those up to the point of about 2:30, but have you got things that you think are worth us starting with?
Yeah, so one question has been asked about teaching and about how teaching might fit into the ref. Would you like to talk to that, Lawrence?
Yes. Okay, in terms of impact, teaching impact is part of, impact on teaching and education and pedagogy is part of what can be taken account of in impact. The actual practice of teaching then comes into some of that. There is also a process called the TEF, as opposed to the REF, the Teaching Excellence Framework. And I am reluctant to say this, but I think it's two things. One, I think, is that beyond the educational research and its impact, I think, and Sarah, you may have a view on this, I don't think teaching is specifically relevant to the REF. However, you can't neglect it. Academics are not just creatures of the ref. And what departments want is people who are equipped to do a much more well-rounded job. So I think, Sarah, does that sound fair to you?
Yes, I think so. So whilst the ref does not take account of teaching, teaching is obviously a really vital part of any university role. And therefore, you know, as a doctoral student, you should be trying to acquire some experience of teaching at least.
Yep. Anything else there, Sarah, that you?
Yeah, so there's been a few questions asking about how the ref links into kind of academic posts. Yeah. So we've had one asking that it's helpful to have publications prior to applying for an academic post. But what's the benefit to the employer if research published during a PhD is not eligible? Similarly, what happens when the university informs a staff member they're not included as part of the ref? And then also, what happens if staff don't publish enough 3-star or 4-star outputs without extenuating circumstances? So that kind of relationship between the university as employer and the employee as ref kind of eligible is apparently of some interest.
Okay. Do you want to have a go at any of that to start, or do you want me to kick off?
I think you should kick off because I think you have a better understanding of what employers are looking for.
Okay. I think let's first just talk quickly about the appointments process. So somebody has asked here about, well, do you need publications for a job? Everywhere is different. There is no single rule that applies anywhere at all. The best thing in terms of looking at jobs is what they're after in their selection criteria. Different places have different needs at different times. That said, if you're seeking a position that involves a research component, and that might typically be a lectureship that is what's sometimes called research and teaching, then publication will be a part of the job description and a part of the requirement. My own sense is that you want to be able to demonstrate your ability to produce and publish research that is really good. And a sole authored piece, or at least where you're the lead author, and this varies heavily in disciplines, one strong peer-reviewed journal article counts for an awful lot, I think, in these processes. So that, I think, is significant, and one that falls within the ref cycle. So if you're publishing in the next couple of years, that places you really well to be able to say to a department in an application, I've got a piece that's refable, as the word goes. In all of this, my advice would always be ask at least 3 people from within your discipline what their views are about the significance of those. Relationship between employer and employee. I think it varies widely. It can be easy to feel vulnerable because sometimes expectations aren't made very clear. I think it can always be good to ask for clarity about expectations. And if you want that, you can send an email to whoever the relevant person was saying, thanks so much for your time today. Just so I'm clear, as I understand it, this is the position going forward. And that can be really helpful. Or these are the types of expectations. So you get yourself a bit of certainty and clarity. I think because the ref works now that every department member where research is a substantial part of their job needs to be returned for the ref. For some places, they want one publication, but that's all they want. They want to make sure you are returnable, but you have other skills that they might want. Other people will pitch themselves as much more strongly research oriented. And somebody has said, does it make a difference if you're not included in the ref? It's a really complex question because at the moment, it's a lot about eligibility, which is governed by pages of rules. Sarah, anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. Other than to emphasise that getting an academic role is much broader than simply your refability, and often it comes down to some very precise departmental requirements that as an applicant you may never be aware of. So for those of you that are about to hit the academic job market, I would like to absolutely say to you that it's probably nothing to do with your application or your refability. If you do not get shortlisted for a role, it's much more likely to be many, many other factors at play.
I think that's absolutely right. The competition is always very strong for jobs. And somebody put it to me years ago that when you're applying as a PhD candidate, for even a later year PhD candidate, an almost PhD, it's very hard to compete against somebody who has a PhD. And so you will find as things progress that you increasingly become, have a stronger profile, whether that's in teaching, whether it's in research, publication, all sorts of stuff. That's not to say that it's easy. I mean, doing a PhD is hard. I admire you all. Sarah, anything? I've got a couple that I can see here that I thought might answer, but anything else you think that is particularly worth answering here?
I am noticing a few questions about how research is allocated a star rating, how the differences between 2 and 3 and 4 star are decided by the ref panels.
Yes. Now, I saw one about this which asked if they were, somebody said, isn't it very subjective?
There's a few that have said that.
Yes. Okay. Somebody else has said what's known about. So we realise you can't see the questions as participants. We've got 41 or 45, so there was a few. The answer is, I think, are these things reviewed? Yes. If you go to the RAND Europe website, you can find, or actually it might be, Google might do it. RAND Europe did some major reports on some of this. King's College London did a major review of it, which has graphs that will keep you and your children entertained for hours. There are so many colours and lines. Are they subjective? Yes, inevitably, in the same way any judgment is subjective. But I think when you are immersed in the enterprise that is the production of knowledge and positioning work within the field, the subjectivity is less. There are judgments to be made, but it's not just drawing it out of a hat. And I would compare it, for instance, to if you were playing in an orchestra, you can appreciate well, I'm sure you could. I don't play in an orchestra, but this is what I imagine it would be like as first violin. you can appreciate the nuance with which people approach pieces and the creativity. If you were playing football, you can appreciate what is a good pass. If you were an athlete, you can appreciate what might be, you know, a precise way of pole vaulting. You can see the technique. And I think that's part of what makes it less subjective. And I think the exercise that I would say is get 10 pieces, read the introductions, and you'll start to see where people articulate things more and less clearly. I think, so it is subjective, but I think they have done or tried to do a pretty solid job of being both inclusive and yet giving criteria. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. And there has been a couple of questions about where you might be able to find examples. And again, if you look on the REF 2014 website, you can either type it into a search engine and it will come up, or we have included the link in the slides. Then you can read examples of 4-star and 3-star case studies, and hopefully you'll be able to see a kind of pattern emerging in the type of scholarship that the REF panels are looking for.
Yeah. Sarah, I'm just going to, you might have one that you think you just want to answer. I'm just going to try and quickly, because we've got 6 minutes, look through just the rest of these questions for a couple of others. So answer whichever you reckon you might tackle.
Well, I think actually, Lawrence, this is one that you might be interested in answering again, but I think it's very relevant to the people that are listening to us. There's a couple of questions asking about how research might move between institutions, particularly as early career researchers can often be on multiple short-term contracts and producing research at the same time. And the research has to be, remind me, Lawrence, does the research have to be, the outputs move with the researcher, is that right?
That is correct. You are talking, I believe, and this says I've spent far too much time reading REF documents. Portability of publications is the essence of the issue. As early career researchers, we do not know what the rules will be next time. I suspect there might be some restrictions, but as early career researchers, that is anyone in the first 6 or 7 years as an academic career, I feel that you are pretty safe that whatever you publish in one place, you would be able to take with you to another institution. Impact might be a little bit different, but I think from your point of view as a PGR student, early career researcher, work on the basis that your main task is, in that strategic sense, is to get that thesis done. That's the main game. And then when you're publishing, to publish something that's good and you're happy with and that you think makes a contribution, and let the REF worry about itself. Does that sound about right, Sarah?
Yep, that's how I understood it. So that's a relief. There's also another question about how you might evidence reach and impact, particularly relating to social media. And I think that's a really interesting question because particularly in some disciplines, social media is a really efficient way of disseminating your research and of engaging with publics that you might not otherwise engage with. I would not say that it's necessarily deemed less important than email feedback. The point when you put together an impact case study or when you are trying to prove your impact anyway is that you have multiple different types of evidence. So you could show that 14,000 people retweeted something that you put online as part of your kind of project. And that can go towards building a really impressive impact case study, particularly if you can also provide email evidence from people that have used your research, saying that it has changed the way that they do things or changed the way that they think. It's about kind of layering up pieces of evidence. So social media engagement can definitely be part of that.
Okay, there is one question I've just seen here that I think is important. There's in different ways, a few people have asked about journal rankings. For the REF, a journal's ranking is not relevant. That is, it's about the piece of research you've done. And so each piece, each publication that is submitted is read. And so therefore that's quite significant. Now, journals might have impact factors or rankings for all sorts of other reasons. But for the ref, it doesn't matter. It might be thought that actually if you're in a great journal, people could look at this more favourably. Possible, but I think you've still got to work on the basis that this is my research and this is what it is. And sometimes you might choose to publish in one place rather than another for all sorts of reasons. And at the moment, you know, that I think that will remain. I don't think there's any shift at all towards saying we should use journal rankings for the ref. We are at 2 minutes to go, which I suspect brings us in at 1 minute. There have been various other questions. We've tried to answer what we can. Sarah, anything else that you just want to flag up or address?
No, I don't think so. I hope that we've answered most of your questions. I'm sorry about the ones that we haven't got to. Do let us know in the feedback form if there were any areas that you think we ought to develop. We'd be happy to run another one of these webinars, or indeed a series, if there were a number of issues that you felt you wanted more information on.
Yep. Great. Right, I believe Michael will probably do the formalities of ending this somehow from the magic computer he's on. But thank you very much to everyone for your interest. We hope it's been helpful, whether you're watching us live or online later. All the best with your PhD research, with your other research, and all else really. Thanks very much. See you later.
Thank you.